This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
Today, we take a peek inside the new National Memorial for Peace and Justice in the Legacy Museum from Enslavement to Mass Incarceration located in Montgomery, Alabama. We'll examine why some want to forget and others want to remember the legacy of slavery, lynching, and segregation right here in America. The Aware Show starts right now. Hi, I'm Dee Dee Sharp, and welcome to this edition of The Aware Show. As always, we're glad to have you right there. The Equal Justice Initiative says now more than ever before, this country needs to be confronted with its history of racial inequality and economic injustice. To do this, EJI, a nonprofit agency, is working to highlight America's legacy of genocide, slavery, lynching, and racial segregation. Well, the organization says a look back at this country's past could actually help us move forward with a true commitment to equal justice for all. To raise awareness to this country's horrid past, EJI unveiled a national memorial for peace and justice and a legacy museum from enslavement to freedom in Montgomery, Alabama. This project is the first of its kind in this country. The memorial and museum are dedicated to the legacy of enslaved Black people, people terrorized by lynching, African Americans humiliated by racial segregation and Jim Crow laws. EJI is involved with many initiatives and projects. One major project is to establish historical markers throughout the United States that pay tribute to victims who were lynched. And that brings us to our guests here in the studio. Joining me are all members of a local community group who are working with EJI and other citizens to establish historical markers here in Pensacola in memory of victims who were lynched here many years ago. Also joining us by telephone, we have Alice Bruton Hurwitz, who is the producer of the film Lily and Leander. The documentary tells the story about some of Alice's relatives who were involved with lynchings that took place in Pensacola and surrounding areas. We'll get to her in just a moment. First, let's introduce you to our guest here in the studio. We're joined by none other than Julie Patton. She's a licensed clinical social worker and assistant professor at the University of West Florida. Next, we have Teniade Bruton, who is a local historian. And to her immediate right, we have C. Scott Satterwhite, also a professor at the University of West Florida. Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Aware Show. We're glad to have you there, and glad to have you there as well, Alice. We'll get to you in just a moment, but welcome to The Aware Show. Absolutely. Before we get started with our studio discussion, I want to give you a little historical background so that you understand what we're talking about here today. To do that, we want to share this with you. It is a video entitled Lynching in America by the Equal Justice Initiative. Take a look and a listen.
After slavery was prohibited in 1865, formerly enslaved people in America were granted full citizenship, the right to vote, and under the 14th Amendment, protection from racial violence. Formerly enslaved people were promised land and opportunity, but most got nothing because America quickly devolved into an era of racial terrorism and oppression for Black citizens. White people in the South were angry that people formerly considered property were now equal citizens. Many turned to violence. In the years immediately following the Civil War, thousands of Black people were murdered when they tried to claim their rights. Soon afterwards, federal troops were withdrawn from the South, ending a brief period of racial progress known as Reconstruction. Nationwide resistance to racial equality resulted in the reestablishment of racial subordination through biased laws, disenfranchisement, and terrorism, most dramatically enforced through lynchings. Racial terror lynchings of black people defined a shameful era in America. These lynchings differed from the hanging of white people in places where there was no functioning criminal justice system. Racial terror lynchings were directed at all black people. They enforced compliance with racial hierarchy and white supremacy, and ensured racial segregation and denial of equal rights. In 1916, in Cedar Bluff, Mississippi, a young black man named Jeff Brown accidentally bumped into a white woman while running to catch a train. A white mob stopped him and lynched him, beating him and then hanging him from a tree for his insolence and carelessness. His public murder was not about criminal punishment, but was instead about maintaining racial hierarchy and terrorizing the black community. White town residents proudly sold photographs of Mr. Brown's brutalized body hanging from the tree for 5 cents each. The Equal Justice Initiative has documented thousands of racial terror lynchings between 1877 and 1950. EJI has confirmed the lynchings of over 4,000 black people who were tortured, maimed, beaten, shot, hung, and burned alive by crowds of white people, often with the cooperation of law enforcement or government officials. The terror of lynching was so widespread that millions of black people fled the South and settled in the urban North and West as refugees of American terror, shaping the current demographic geography of the United States. On July 5, 1933, an older black woman named Elizabeth Lawrence reprimanded a group of white children who threw rocks at her as she walked home from work. Word spread that a black woman had dared to rebuke white children, and that night, an angry mob of white citizens lynched Ms. Lawrence for her audacity. Her home was then burned to the ground. Her son, Alexander, fled to Boston. Racial terror lynchings often had the atmosphere of carnivals, with food vendors and souvenir stands. Hundreds or thousands of white people would often gather to watch and take part in the torture and murder of black citizens. There has been no effort in America to confront this legacy of racial terror. While hundreds of Confederate monuments litter the landscape in southern states, there has been no public recognition of the violence endured by black people. On October 7, 1910, a white mob in Montgomery, Alabama tried to abduct and lynch black men being held in jail on suspicion of miscegenation, or interracial sexual relations. When they were unable to get the men out of the jail, the frustrated mob lynched a black taxi driver named John Dell, who was sitting in his cab nearby. No one was ever arrested or prosecuted for his murder. EJI's Community Remembrance Project collects soil from the many sites where terror lynchings occurred. Jars labeled with the names of murdered black citizens are on public display at EJI, a powerful visual reminder of history we must face. EJI is working to create a permanent memorial to honor victims of lynching, a place to reflect on America's history of racial violence. We hope to place historical markers at hundreds of lynching sites around the country. Contemporary issues like police violence, excessive punishment in the criminal justice system, and even harsh and punitive treatment of children of color in schools and on streets cannot be understood without a deeper examination into our history of racial violence. More truthful discourse and reflection on our history of racial injustice is essential for us to achieve racial equity. Confronting the legacy of lynching is critical to advancing this conversation. We hope you will join our effort to help towns, cities, and states confront and recover from these tragic histories of racial violence through truth and reconciliation, where there can truly be equal justice for all.
That should give you some historical background as to what we're talking about here on The Aware Show. The Equal Justice Initiative aims to confront the legacy of slavery, lynching, and segregation to advance race reconciliation, that is. Well, here to give us a little bit more history and to fill us in on what's being done with EJI's local historical marker project are my guests again here in our studio. We're joined by Scott, Teniade, and of course, Julie, and you all are basically doing the historical background work and also moving to work with EJI on a local level to bring the marker here. and have some representation for what happened here in Pensacola. We're going to talk about our history here in just a moment from what we do know and what you all are trying to do. But first, I want to kind of start with the fact that we see this as Black history, but this is all of our history. And for me, I don't know about you watching it there and you all what you know. When I saw this, I realized I know about lynching, but I don't know that about lynching. And so this was an awareness even for me as we researched to do this show. We can start with either of you, Scott, Teniade, Julie. This is not just Black history. This is all of our history. Right. Julie?
It is. And one of the people who brought that to my awareness was Tom Garner, who also teaches at the university and is a member of the group that's trying to work with the Equal Justice Initiative. And I think that we like to think of this in a separate category from the community history. But actually, it belongs to all of us. And the racially motivated lynchings are connected to issues like the Confederate monuments, the colonial monuments, to many other pieces of history in our community. And I guess that my feeling is until we bring it all together in some way as a balanced, complete history, we'll have trouble understanding ourselves and understanding the tensions that we have in our community right now.
You know, the word his is in history, but everybody just wants to tell their part and not the whole part. And I think that's what's happening here with EJI. Do you want to shed some light on any of this, Scott?
Yeah, when I first found out about the lynchings in Pensacola, it actually came from looking at another topic. I was looking through some newspapers from the early 1900s on a strike that took place in Pensacola, a streetcar strike, and it was 1908. And I went back a little bit later to look at this strike and look at to find some of the data. I knew it was in April, sometime around there, but I couldn't remember the year when I went back a few months later to look it up again. And when I did, I got the year mixed up, and I had the year. Picked up the file for 1909. So I went through the microfiche and saw 1909, got the date, and then the first thing that jumped out: man lynched in Pensacola. Can't remember the exact headline, but that was basically it. And it was the lynching of David Alexander. And when I read that and I saw this, it was the very first time I'd ever seen that here. And I'd done a decent amount of reading on Pensacola history as a novice, somebody who's just reading up on local history of the place that you're in. And when I came across that, it was a bit shocking that there wasn't something there. We find a lot of history that is celebrated locally. We have things with the Civil War, of course, is endlessly talked about, even though the Confederacy here in Pensacola is momentary. But that's a big part of our history. And then we have the Battle of Pensacola, with Galvez and the big statue that just came up recently. So we have those kind of things. And we have other things that pop up, the air station. But to have this as part of the history and just completely not discussed. So I went looking, tried to find more information. And the only information I could find was from the newspapers. There's one book out there that mentioned a few of them, but it was really only like one or two lines, and there wasn't much out there. When I first came across this, it was really shocking first to come across this and read these stories, but then I started to do a little more research and find out about the other lynchings that took place here, and I found out about multiple lynchings that happened over here. In fact, one that happened just a few months before that one with David Alexander. So seeing this and then noticing that there just wasn't anything out there was I felt a great disservice to our history, because we like to think of the history as something that we need, that we celebrate, and we look for, but we don't tend to look critically at this history. And this is something that we needed to spend a few minutes, to put it lightly, to discuss.
Mm-hmm. And Teniade, you're very active in trying to do things locally on behalf of having a partnership with EJI. Tell us a little bit about you're wanting to work with them to make something happen here in Pensacola in terms of embracing our history and the legacy of slavery here and lynching.
Right, so two things.
I should say.
One is collecting soil. In the video we just saw, it talked about the Community Remembrance Project, where we will be collecting soil from the sites of the lynchings. And we have our jars already. We have 6 to commemorate each person who's listed on our marker. You might have seen our Escambia County marker.
And we can take a look at that marker as we're even talking right now, and we'll get a chance and we'll talk a little bit about your experience at the memorial and how you got the picture and that sort of thing, but at least we'll be able to show the marker here on the air right there. That is Escambia County represented in Montgomery, Alabama, on a marker where they have a memorial now of more than 800 counties across the country that are represented with victims of lynchings across our country. Tell us a little bit more about the local effort.
Right, and there's also the matching steel monument that we're trying to bring home. And hopefully we'll be the first county to bring theirs home, but we have to find a place for it to go. And we've been just basically, the Race and Reconciliation group and this entire community group, we've just been trying to educate the community on the importance of memorializing these men and telling this story. So when we talk about how to tell the story of lynching, which is a sad one, it's uncomfortable, the first thing we have to do is be okay with being uncomfortable when it comes to talking about race. And part of that truth and reconciliation, and EJI talked about how they even used the method from South Africa and Nazi Germany on how you just have to face the past even though it makes you uncomfortable. That's one of the things that our community is doing here. When we showed the Lily and Leander documentary, it was a diverse group, and we just had to face that past in the discussion about it. So the first thing you have to do is get uncomfortable, be willing to get uncomfortable. Then the next thing you have to do is be committed to saying, how are we going to face this in a positive way and come out of it all positively? This is a little bit different from the story of the monuments because, we're still fighting over those Confederate monuments. But now as a group, we're all working together, and we want to make sure this doesn't have the same effect that the Confederate monuments have on the community. So with that said, there's the soil collection, and then there's getting the monument from Montgomery back to Pensacola.
Okay.
And we're all doing it together.
And we're going to go to Alice in just a moment, who's standing by on the line. She's going to tell us about her story and her family who were actually involved with lynchings. And she's going to share a little bit about that particular documentary that you're talking about, Lily and Leander, in just a moment. But first, I just want to say, the first thing that will come to someone's mind watching the show is going to be, why are we erecting monuments and memorials and having museums that are telling the stories of slaves and lynchings and segregation and that sort of thing at a time when we're trying to bring down Confederate monuments that some have seen as controversial and say that it's their history, and others say it's not history. It's actually hurtful. So what do we say to that, Scott? Why now? Why are we doing this now?
Well, I think I could put it better by by saying that the history of the Confederate statue that came up in Pensacola is directly connected with these histories of lynchings that are taking place. When the statue came up in Pensacola, the Confederate statue, this was at a period when Pensacola was, if not majority black, it was pretty close to 50-50. By the next census that came up afterwards, 1900, Pensacola was majority black. And this is exactly when the lynchings started. They, at least the ones that are listed in this, on the memorial. In 1899 is one of the first ones we have with Wesley Clark, and then we have the next one is an unknown person in 1902. Then we have another one in Lily and Leander, Leander Shaw, thinking of the film, with Leander Shaw, and with David Alexander coming after, and then Robert Matthews following this. So this is in this period of time when there was a lot of change that was taking place in Pensacola. Pensacola was now a majority black town. Booker T. Washington even wrote about this in one of his books when he described Pensacola as a strong black business community. What he meant was that it was a black community, that this was a black city. And this is something that we don't really discuss. It's not really talked about very much. A lot of people know this, but it's not in the history books that you find at the library. And this is an important part of this, because I don't think that you can really divorce the statue's erection with the lynchings that are taking place at that period, because they're directly connected. So to bring this up at that time, move ahead, almost 100 years, more than 100 years, then what we could see is that as we're talking about taking the statues down, as people are talking about removing the statues, or even just moving that statue. Even I think one of the big movements with that statue wasn't the complete destruction of the statue, but it was just to move it over to St. John's Cemetery. But even with that, it was still very highly contested, but we still have trouble at the same time talking about why we should memorialize these lynchings. The lynchings are incredibly horrible. They're a very sad part of our city's history, county's history, but so was the Civil War. Yeah. So were all the wars that happened, sure. And we can still memorialize that. This morning I read names at the Vietnam Wall Memorial. 58,000 people. We have the names over there, people that are killed in a terrible war, and these are names of people. And we're okay with discussing that, in certain contexts. But within this one, the problem is that now we have to talk about race too, because you can't just bring that up, and that is the one thing we just have so much trouble talking about is race.
Right. Okay. Well, we've been mentioning it. Lily and Leander is a documentary now, and we want to share a little of the excerpt with you. So here's just a little, the trailer from the documentary. And in just a moment, we will talk with the producer, who is Alice Bruton Hurwitz. She's standing by with us on the line. But first, take a look at her trailer.
My grandmother, Alice, told me the story when I was 20. I guess old enough to know bad things. She went right into the story of her aunt, Lily Allen Bruton, who had been raped and assaulted by a black man, Leander Shaw, in 1908. She went into the back room to get the change box out, and he jumped her, assaulted her, and cut her throat. They caught the man washing out his bloody shirt in the bag. A mob gathered, and the shooting started when they started storming the jail. They had the black man in no time at all. So I looked up Lily's youngest brother's youngest son's phone number. I said, well, the reason I'm calling you is I've been working on a documentary. And then he added at the end of the conversation, well, it didn't stop there. I got real quiet, and I knew that a bomb was ready to drop.
They put a sign out that said, read nigger and run. If you can't read, run in the house. And if you come on past Grandpa's up here, Grandpa would go to the telephone.
I don't know if we can say this.
Call Riley, him and his boys, and Grandpa boys down there meet. They killed the nigger, bury him under a walnut tree, and that went on for years.
The story fits some of the folklore up here.
Jay was one of those read, nigger, and run places.
We're going to do what we can to search the area to determine if this is true.
I took her downwind of it. She immediately turned and went to it and dug.
Right outside, where the nigger was killed.
How many?
There were like 3 places in this area.
And Uncle Joe said there were hundreds of them.
All right, you're just watching the trailer from Lily and Leander, and joining us on the phone, the producer of this documentary, Alice Bruton Hurwitz. Thank you so much for standing by on the line, Alice, and welcome to the Aware Show again.
Well, thank you for including me, Ms. Sharp.
Absolutely. Alice, tell us a little bit more about what your story is as we talk about this very difficult subject matter of lynchings and terror in America at a time in our history when many want to forget and others want to confront it and remember.
Well, I think that if I had known the end of that story or the completeness of it, I wouldn't have started it because it would have scared me to death. As it is, I got started into the story because I just wanted to explore what my grandmother had told me. Now it's been 50 years ago. She told me there had been a lynching, connected with the family and the death of her aunt. And I remember being so shocked that she used the word lynching. At 20 years old, you thought of that as a bizarre, rare, horrible thing. And the first thing I said to her was, Grandma, are they sure they had the right man? That was just my first reaction. And she put her head down and shook her head, and she said, yes. And I did learn later on, years and years later when I began researching it, through the microfilm out at the university, that the sheriff, Van Pelt, who later was also connected with my family, had been a very honest, trusted person, and he took not only Leander into the hospital where Lily was because she lived for 2 days and finally died of blood loss, but he brought in 2 other black men who looked similar and asked her, is this the one? And then separately, is this the one? And she adamantly said no to the 2. And then when Leander was brought before her, she was so upset and seeing that this was the man who attacked her that they had to quickly remove him from the room. And even though Sheriff Van Pelt at the time had, eyewitness, so to speak, identification of him, he was not going to allow him within his power to be lynched. And, I came to admire him as a very brave man because he outfitted his deputies with guns that he had to buy extra, and had them shoot at the crowd that was trying to storm the jail. So I was very proud that there was at least one good, honest man on the scene, but there were so many men who were at the front of the jail, the back of the jail, that they did get him eventually and drug him around, hung him, and then shot him multiple times.
Let me ask you about your grandmother's demeanor in telling you about this story. Did it seem as though she was suffering from some type of trauma from having perhaps witnessed, or did it seem as though there was some, I don't want to say celebration, but what was her demeanor about telling you of the story of her family being involved? She was
sad and ashamed.
Okay.
In fact, in this one day, she told me all of the family bad stories. Mm. She was preserving figs, boiling them on the stove. And we were then, one of us would get up and stir the figs, and then we'd sit back down at the table. And she would continue to tell me stories, her cruel and bad first husband, etc. And then she got to this story, and I think when I got so shocked about the lynching part, that she quit the story early. Hmm. She must have known about the murders later on, and I think, of course, the women did know about it, but wouldn't have told it because, number one, who are they going to tell it to? The men of the family often were sheriffs and sheriff's deputies. But she, I think, was ashamed of it, and she just closed her mouth and she didn't say another word about it.
And obviously your reaction has been to tell the story and to be public about it, even though you said if you'd known the end, you probably wouldn't have began. but still you have.
I'll admit to being, a coward at times. And when I found this out, it just rocked me big time. And I knew it would be devastating, as far as breaking me away from the family. But the students at NYU, I worked in the film school as academic advisor. They were always knowing the story, because when you're in New York City, you're far away from Pensacola. They just insisted that, I had to tell the story, and they supported me in that. Many of them volunteered their time and work on it. And an ex-student, Jeff Morgan, who had graduated already, he directed the film and is dedicated to this day to this film. In fact, he's finishing a second one about the Pensacola area and a murder that was done there in 2010 that shows that the scars from that past history is influencing us even today. Mm-hmm. It doesn't go away so easy.
And I also understand that you have been very adamant in meeting with community leaders and ministers and that sort of thing to try to raise awareness and confront this. We're going to take a quick excerpt again at your documentary, Lily and Leander, and we'll come back and just briefly explain that to our viewers as well. Okay.
All right, thanks.
You have the floor.
Okay, well, what I'm trying to find out are the names of some of these men who died, and see if there's stories out there in your congregations or in your families, people you know, that might cross over directly with a story I heard from my grandma and was told to me by two of my old male cousins. See, I don't think racial relations are that good now.
Guess what?
We're being polite, but it's not that good under the surface.
That's right.
And if we don't know what went on and the things that led up to that, I think we'll always be circling back in.
That's true.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I know one guy was from our home while we were living. He was going through Atmore, and he said a white guy, and his son was on the porch, and he was sitting there with you say when they passed along the road, and he had the gun in his lap, and they saw this black guy coming, and the reason he didn't kill him, because him and his son was tussling over the gun, said, Dad, let me kill this nigga today, so you killed that one yesterday, I want to kill this nigga today.
But it says a lot about you as a person to undertake this journey, and certainly I don't know if you're a Christian or not, but you're among a bunch of Christian gentlemen.
I am.
You will have our prayers.
Alice, I know this is, just bravery on your part to step up and step out and tell your story, and the fact that your family was involved with lynching that you know of, and in the history of your family, not anything recent, but still your history. And so we appreciate you for sharing your story here on the Aware Show. What came out of meeting with the ministers and that sort of thing as you take this forward and continue in your research?
No, well, I'll tell you something, Dee. Nothing came out of it.
Okay.
And I think that I know why. As I went through the process of making this film and discovering things, I realized that the black population of Pensacola and probably other areas is still extremely frightened of what white people can do to them if they speak about such things. I advertised, I asked at this assembly of reverends to get the stories of black men in Pensacola who disappeared, and we know plenty of them did. I even wrote the state under the Sunshine Law and asked did they have any reports of black men who had disappeared during that era, even though I knew that reporting that would have ended up in the trash can, back then and probably today. I've only recently learned in the past few years the names of 2 brothers who did disappear, and they went up that direction to look for work in the lumber mill.
Okay.
They were twin brothers. That was just an accident of running into someone who had been researching something similar. But most black people that we wanted to interview and ask them personal questions, things that had happened in their family, who lived in that general area, were frightened to say anything.
Interesting.
You know, like Vida Carter, who was in the film. When I would call to make an appointment to come interview her, she would cancel it, you know, for different reasons. So there was a young woman working on her master's degree, Valerie Hollinger, at UWF, who was a black woman, and she would help me. She would get me through the door. We would come to the door, knock on the door, no warning ahead of time. And with her being black and appealing to to her, you know, she appealed to them as a black woman, she would pull me in behind her. And that was something that I didn't know. I didn't think fear on that level existed today, even though we were shooting this film, you know, like 12 years ago.
Okay.
But the stories are dying or lying dormant because of the fear factor.
And that's why I said hats off to you, and thanks for being brave to tell your story. Scott, tell us a little bit about, we've been talking about the history here locally, and Teniati, you can get in on this, and certainly you too. Julie, tell us about the climate here in Pensacola. How do you see this? We can talk about the millennials and how you all see it, and we can also, of course, talk about it from the historical perspective, bringing it up till now, how you all see it. Teniati?
Well, from listening to Ms. Hurwitz,
yes,
it makes sense. I think during the WPA narratives, when a black interviewer would interview a subject, they get a different answer from a white interviewer, because basically it was the white interviewer coming to the subject asking, well, how was slavery for you? You're going to get a different answer. So she met a different answer when she went to the black community, and that's because you have to let black folks tell our stories and almost go into the situation knowing that if you're a direct descendant of the people who killed me, I'm not going to be comfortable sharing this thing with you. So you have to figure out a way to allow them a way to be able to tell it without the threat. And sometimes your presence itself is just a threat. So what I'm seeing now, maybe more so with my generation, is that we aren't necessarily, I actually met a woman who knew people, who knew these people, who had gotten the stories directly from her mother. I would say that my generation is probably the first who's very much disconnected from it. And because of it, we don't carry the same type of, we have a little more objectivity. And we are also in a place now, because of the things that those folks went through, to demand more. Good. So I can say that it's not your fault, but it's really not my fault, right? You didn't lynch anyone, and I didn't lynch anyone. So let's move away from that. You know, it's part of the story about, being directly at
no
blame.
One's pointing a finger or blaming anyone.
To see how we can have the conversation, how we're gonna just memorialize all of it. There is
I think these 10 years, Kenyade, have made a difference. You know, that people have grown past the sheer fear of it, but they had it when we were interviewing, and there's some stories that are now lost because the people who held on to them have died.
That's sad. Julie?
In fact, most of the people in the documentary are deceased. You know, it was just...
and that's no accident.
I hate to sound too religious, but it was God's will that it get made when it was.
I think,
and those stories were heard.
Yes.
And I think there's a sense in which they are stories that nobody wanted told. And so it really is no surprise that they didn't get told for the most part. And I guess that to me, the issue is not just fear, but it's also trust. And it's a question of whose story it is. And I think that because of lack of trust between the African American community and the white community, I have found myself that many African Americans are very reluctant to surrender a narrative that's theirs and that's part of their lives, because they don't really know what I'm going to do with it, or what Scott is going to do with it, or what the university is going to do with it.
That's right.
You know? And so I think that part of what we've tried to do at Race and Reconciliation is we've been meeting for 3 years now to have discussions about these tensions. And I think that part of what we've been doing is giving people an opportunity to tell the story as their story in their way, without anybody doing anything with it besides try to grow from it. And I think that that's what allows us at that point to look now at the lynching issue and really how we can go forward with that, because I think there's some trust. We tried a year and a half ago to get people interested in this issue, and nobody really picked it up. People said yes, yes, but nobody really picked it up. And I think that now, a year and a half later, people are much more willing to try to engage some of the difficult parts of it. But I think what it's important to say is that one group of people who's working on this is this group of people that you see here, along with some other people from Race and Reconciliation, Movement for Change, a lot of groups in Pensacola. But there are other groups who are really not so directly connected with us. There's a group of people from St. Anthony's Church. And I think that now that we're moving forward with the project, we're really looking at trying to strengthen the dialogue with them, because that's a church with a large African American population. I think that we need to return some of the story to them as well. In addition, the Episcopal Diocese in Pensacola is very interested in advancing the narrative, and we'd like to join with them as well. But the point to me is that there's been such a lack of trust, as well as some fear, I'm sure, that people have been reluctant to join together, to find out who the other people are who are interested in it, and to make a united effort to move forward with the story. So we're starting with the soil. Tenyate's starting with the soil. She's got the jars. We just have talked this week about getting a shovel and getting a trowel and looking at how we need to proceed with that. But there's a lot of tentativeness in who is your ally, who is against you. If you tell some really sacred narrative in your life, what is somebody else going to do with it? And that was one of the really exciting things to me about going to the opening of the memorial in Montgomery, because the conference itself was amazing. There were just thousands of people from all over the world, and there were different races and groups represented, and just a tremendous atmosphere of collaboration and friendliness. And then I spent a couple of hours just sitting in the deepest part of the memorial, which is really a sacred space. It's really a holy space. And in that process, I was able to watch people move through. And there were many people who had come with someone from another race. They had not just come with their husband or their neighbor or whatever. There were some mixed racial groups and couples who were there. There were African Americans who were just very distressed and tearful often, but also rather joyous in another way, that their history was out here in the open and everybody was acknowledging that it happened in a very respectful way. And then what I also saw were just really horrified white people, women especially, a lot of men, who really couldn't even make eye contact because they were so uncomfortable, as Tanyade said in the beginning. And so I think what we're finding now is the courage to talk and a little bit more trust to go forward. But I think that there's still a very significant lack of trust that has everybody tentative.
Okay, and Tanyade, when we also know that you were also able to go to the opening of the memorial in the museum in Montgomery recently. Tell us about your experience.
Right. Well, it was inspiring. It was also I cried. I'll say that, but I wasn't the only one crying. A lot of people were crying. I was able to see the Legacy Museum.
Why were you crying? Let's just stop there and let me just tap into that emotion for you.
Okay. Well,
what were the tears?
Well, it was overwhelming.
Okay.
Right? And they did such a great job of telling
history and
they did such a great job of presenting the history that it just almost made you feel like you were there. So when you first walk into the museum itself is in a former slave pen, I guess is what it's called, the building itself. And there's a wall that lets you know that this is where the people were sold. Montgomery was a traffic place for slavery. And then when you walk inside the museum, they have holograms of actors basically telling the stories of what a person in the pen might have experienced. And so the museum does a good job of connecting slavery to mass incarceration. So you're able to see how it's this basic idea of the need to criminalize Black people, present Black people as something that should be feared, and just controlling Black bodies, period, is from slavery and how it continues today. So before, when I said when you as a person weren't a part of that lynch mob or didn't participate in lynching, now you can look at whatever ways you might be symbolically participating in the continuation of that. So when we look at the news and we see the thing that happened at Starbucks, and then we can compare it to the woman who admonished the children who were throwing rocks at her, I think it was something. Or the lady with the barbecue, recently calling the cops on Black people at the barbecue, or just Black folks just being in public. You see, there's a connection between the fear of Black bodies and the need to control Black people today. That was the reason some of those folks were being lynched back then. So even if you didn't participate in lynchings back then, in what way are you setting up the stage for these people for Black folks to be discriminated against and targeted today? Also in the prison system, the museum talked a lot about the prison system and how Black folks are disproportionately represented in prisons, and because Black communities are policed more and get longer sentences, and how Black and brown children are in prisons with adults. And then we can also see how, I think in the video clip, it talked about how like a pregnant woman, well, we know in one of the lynching stories, there was a pregnant woman who was lynched. So when we can connect the stories, that's where you can find your responsibility. Again, you might not have been responsible then, but you're responsible now.
What are you doing now?
What are you doing now?
To bring about justice for all. Absolutely. That's
and
good.
The museum did a good job of telling that. So it also carried us through slavery, mass incarceration, and when you see the memorial outside, it's almost like the floor slants, or the floor descends. So even though the markers themselves are at the same level, because the floor is descending, it almost looks like they're rising. So by the time you get to Escambia County, the marker is above your head, and they all kind of feel like bodies. And so you automatically imagine like the lyrics to Strange Fruit, and then the matching monuments that are in the perimeter of the monument are the same as the ones hanging, but it almost feels like you're going to look for graves at a cemetery.
Yes.
And inside, though, back inside, you do see one where there's soil collected from different cities, and it's all laying in one glass displayed that almost feels like a coffin in a little way. So it's a little bit, it's not morbid, but it's just, I noticed that when we walked in, people were whispering because you knew you were in a sacred space.
Yeah.
And it made you feel, like you had to have a moment of silence and respect for what happened here.
Yeah.
And because, the whole thing is, those names are there because those people never, even if they were guilty, they never got justice,
Right.
So.
Never got a trial.
Right, never got a trial, so they never saw justice. And really, in his Lily and Leander case, he never saw justice, but she never saw justice either because the mob grabbed her out the jail and he never got his day in court. So it basically puts us in a place to saying, how are we as a society going to confront what these morals like, justice and peace and memory, what does all this mean to us as a community? And the EJI Museum afforded us an opportunity to really sit down and have these conversations with one another about how we want to tell this story and how we're all going to add a voice to it.
And Scott, you've been working to be a voice in many ways in the classroom as you teach history and also in some of your writings. Tell us about that.
Well, actually, I teach literature, just to clarify. But I'll tell you one example. A few years ago, I taught James Baldwin's famous story, Going to Meet the Man, which is a really horrific story about a lynching. And in the story, without going into it too much, actually, I won't even tell the story. It's just a horrific story that everybody could read on their own. I coupled that with the reading by Angela Davis that was talking about Strange Fruit, the song Strange Fruit, and then I added the video documentary that's still in production, but it's almost done now, called Always in Season, which was about lynchings. And none of this stuff, in fact, I even brought in the director of the film, and she spoke to the class, and none of this had to do with anything in Pensacola. And I was a bit surprised that there was still a lot of resistance to showing it, discussing it within the class. Not as much, I shouldn't say a lot, maybe it's about a decent portion of the class just did not want to talk about it.
And when you say resistance, what do you mean? You mean students just did not want to be confronted? They didn't want to hear the history? They didn't want to...
Why do we have to hear about this all the time? Why do we have to hear about this all the time? And it's shocking to me because I think it's like, when was the last time somebody just came up to me and started talking about lynching? It doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen, but there's this idea that it's coming up all the time, and, at least with, some folks. And that was a bit of a shock to me because I thought that, all right, this is far past this time. It's not dealing directly with anybody in here's specific families, but also, playing in context a little bit with what you were saying about reluctance with a lot of people to talk about this, within the community. And remember, too, that this is, when we're going around talking about this, especially now when we're talking about lynchings, that when you read these stories of the lynchings, they're incredibly brutal. The one with Leander Shaw and also the one with David Alexander happened right afterwards, involved a large chunk of Pensacola's white community. I think roughly around 10% of Pensacola's white community was at one of those lynchings. And that's a lot of people. They had shot one of those people so much that the Navy base had to call over here just to double check to make sure that the city wasn't under attack, that it was that brutal. And if you read the stories, blood is in Ferdinand Plaza, people are picking up body parts and all this stuff. It's just incredibly terrible. And then you think about reading that in 2015, and you look at Philando Castile, you look at the video of this, you look at these other videos, this rampant number of videos online that we could see. It shocks me, going through the Facebook feed, for a while when these were all over the place, and you would see these videos and looking at that, and then seeing how is this not connected, to this, and how do we not see this, at least in some kind of direct way? Maybe not directly, of course, but it's hard not to read those stories and then see those videos and then say, this is why maybe people are a little reluctant to talk about this right now, because these are really, really traumatic stories, and the trauma is being forced on everybody to look at this and deal with this and talk about it.
Well, and I think it's part of our deep unconscious as well. As you descend in the monument and the floor goes down, you feel like you're underground, and I think that that's where we've kept these stories. It's part of the underground stream that runs through the South especially. And nobody really wants to confront their unconscious unless they've made some kind of deliberate choice to go into therapy or to, so.
And we talk about this, yet we don't want to talk about it. But there's some real trauma from this, from the fallout of this. And so, you know, those are the types of things that we don't want to discuss, but it's very real and it's still very much present for the African American community and for people who have been touched by this and continue to be, because as we were talking about, there's the fear factor here. Alice, before we let you go, is there a closing comment you have for us here on The Aware Show? Joining us via phone, Alice Hurwitz.
Well, there's just a couple of things, and I will try to make it brief.
Okay.
In getting ready for this panel discussion, which I very much appreciate being included in, I looked at the WSRE, you know, past programs, as I mentioned to you, and after seeing all the good work that you're all doing, the people at UWF and Pensacola State College and yourself and, you know, the program administrators, I have tremendous hope that Pensacola and the area will be greatly improved in the race and reconciliation.
Thank you so much, Alice. We thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'm just, you know, I know Tom Garner, as you might know.
Yes.
He worked as a researcher on our film, and
right. We have to close with you because I just want to give a closing comment for Teniate. But thank you so much for joining us again, Alice. Just in less than 10 seconds, tell us a little bit about that project if people want to be involved with collecting the soil.
Okay. We have the names of people who are going to volunteer to dig the soil, and they're going to do it in memory of the folks, the 6 names we have here on our marker. And we will give you more information about that. It's on the Instagram page at Black Pensacola. So if you know somebody who is connected to the story or just would like them to offer their help, then add Black Pensacola or Race and Reconciliation.
Okay, very good.
Black Pensacola might be, Tenyatta is really the point person in putting together the people who will do the digging.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for being here. In a letter from Birmingham jail, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said this famous quote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." So whether you agree or disagree with looking back at this country's history of injustice, perhaps you can agree it still exists. The Equal Justice Initiative believes it's working to effect change and level the scales of justice for all. Perhaps we should ask ourselves, what are we doing? What are you doing? If you'd like more information about EJI's project, go to EJI's website at egi.org. And to contact our guests for more information, of course, that information will be available to you here on the screen. That is all the time we have for now for The Aware Show. As always, I want to thank my guests. Thank you for joining us. Thank Alice over the phone line. And be sure to catch us on Facebook, I should say on YouTube, as well as at WSRE.org. Until the next time, I'm Dee Dee Sharp saying, stay informed and stay aware.